I mean, the vast majority of our assets are in the United States. And so obviously the will would cover those assets.
Yeah.
But for, we, like others, we have cars here, we have personal effects, we have, a bank account with some small amount of money. Would we need to do anything with those wills to make sure to expedite the process?
What would I advise you is get them in Arabic, attest them in Qatar, and keep them with you. It will help you expedite the process, because your will back home is done differently. A lawyer, you're there and you sign it, witnessed, and pretty much that's it. And then it will be presented to the court and will be done. But in Qatar, the complexity is that they will need to know that this is actually your will, and to know that they will ask whomever is taking over that process to go and attest it, translate it, get it back, submit it to the court, and then it will be subject to the interpretation or the translation. Sometimes translations do not reflect whatever will you had in place.
So where could we get it translated and attested? By someone who knows how to translate legal documents, not just by a general translator?
Well, what I would say is make sure that whomever is doing it, there are lots of translation agencies, whomever is doing it, you need to make sure that it reflects the spirit. It doesn't have to be a literal translation, because sometimes they don't make sense.
If you have bank accounts, right, upon that the bank account gets frozen, right, you're not able to access money. So a lot of people who say we have joint accounts, we are safe, they're actually not.
True.
The advice I got was to have a joint account, but also have a separate account for your spouse.
It could be, but another solution is when you go and open a bank account, a joint bank account, you sign an agreement. Pretty much you don't have a choice to change it, right? It's printed. But what you can do is ask the bank that if anything happens to either one of us, we would like the bank account to remain as is, not blocked. So if you put it in the agreement, your lawyer can easily submit it to the court and say they've agreed on the bank account. There are injunctions that you can, and motions, you can apply for it. Take an example of a joint account. If I have a joint account with my wife, I pass away, then the account is frozen. Judges are not robots. They do understand that she needs to live off that account. So you can go and file a motion, and they will monitor the spending, and they will allow her to spend, but under their supervision. So a solution could be what was proposed to you, opening a different account, and another solution is basically in the agreement decide to leave it open if something happened to either one.
And I think a lot of people sort of say that we don't keep much in this country. I mean, I've lived there long enough. And some of the other things people are not thinking about are future proceeds, right? Insurance money. Where does that come in, right? Or if you have end of service benefit, which is accumulated by the employer and that gets paid out, where is the money going to be deposited? So I think people have a snapshot of what they have today. But
see, with employers, they don't have a choice. They will have to transfer it to your account, because they usually, when they open accounts and sign agreements, the bank will require them to make sure that they transfer the entitlements to that account. So whatever is transferred there will be blocked or frozen, as you said. It's an important issue, especially with joint accounts. But as I said, you can agree with the bank and sign agreement, and it could facilitate the process for you. Well, what happens is once a person passes away, because there are heirs, legal heirs, the estate of that person doesn't belong to anyone. It needs to be distributed to the legal heirs. So what the government or the banks do, they would be frozen these accounts or freezing these accounts to make sure that nothing will be spent illegally or not in accordance with the inheritance laws. And it happens a lot, not in a non-local. In a local sense, when a father passes away and he has sons and daughters and children, sometimes they get into a fight regarding who's spending what. So this process is precautionary, and I think the central bank requires that. You need to freeze the bank account.
Then if something happens to me, does my executor need to come here to Qatar to make sure that everything goes smoothly?
Let me go back to the attesting part. You will need to do it in Canada. And I think we don't have an embassy there. I think we have a consulate. We have an embassy actually in Canada. So you will need to go there and they will need to sign it and stamp it. Then you will have to send it to Qatar and they will do the same process. Your executor doesn't have to travel. He can appoint a lawyer to do that process. As long as the will gives him the power to manage that process, he can appoint a lawyer. Or he can travel into Qatar and take the process himself to the court. But the translation you can do in Canada, if they do translation, you don't have to do it not necessarily in Qatar.
And then what I have here in this country would go into my frozen bank account, and then how do those funds get released?
Once the court looks at the will and believes that this is what should be applied, then they will instruct the bank based on the executor wish to which account needs to be transferred and how they will do it, or the court would sell it for them, do an auction, or will allow him to take the car and sell it himself. So the process beyond the court, once the court is convinced, it's not a difficult process.
You've been talking about wills. How about, is there the concept of living wills? Something you're incapacitated, you're not dead, but you're incapacitated.
Yes,
they cannot make decisions on your behalf.
The same rules applies. Your home country law will apply on this case. If you didn't have a will, or if you didn't have specific instructions to deal with your belongings and yourself, what will happen is that they will look at your own laws and they will apply them. So if the laws, for example, in Qatar, if something goes wrong with me, my father is alive, so my father will be able to step in and take care, be the legal guardian. My wife will be the custodian, but my father will be the legal guardian to process whatever governmental applications they need. In terms of dual nationality, they will look at the last nationality. When you come to Qatar, you come on a visa. You cannot come with two nationality visa. It will be one passport that you will have your residency on. So it can be used as the official one to deal with this issue. As for who notifies the banks, your employers, they have a duty to report and transfer all of the entitlements to the bank account and inform them. Now, if somebody passes away in Qatar, basically they will take him to the hospital. The mortuary is in the hospital. They do in the system. It will be written down that XYZ passed away. This is their visa number. This is their nationality. So it will go on system, and it's a shared system with the government. So if somebody tries to go and do something on your behalf, they will be able to find it. They will see in the system the person passed away. I know that there are requirements, for example, under New York, that you have to follow to have a valid will. What we would advise is, because most of the expats, they keep their assets at minimum in the country, what we advise them is just do a small will in Qatar and keep it in Qatar. You don't have to do it in Qatar and use it back home, because first of all, whomever is doing it in here, they might not understand the laws back home. Unless you have somebody qualified in Qatar who can help you and take you through the process and create a valid will in Qatar and back home, we wouldn't advise doing that. Whatever you have in the country, we have a client who advised their employees, they're a foreign company, to keep ownership minimum. We don't think they should do that. You should, if people think investing in Qatar is good for them, they should do it. As long as they can, if they do that, they need to make sure that they have a valid will that explains the process for whomever comes in to enforce that will, meaning the court system in Qatar.
Yeah, for a Muslim non-Qatari who is a resident in Qatar and who has written a will, if there are some of the parts of that will that conflicts with Sharia law, does the judge have the authority to step in and override the will?
No, actually what happens is if your back home laws allows it, he does not have the power to overcome that. Your hometown laws will apply, no matter what, to what extent it's conflicting with Sharia law. Now, in Qatar, we have Sunnis and Shias. We have different followers of Islam, and each one has their own principles. The court does not apply the same principles to everybody. For sure, they have a norm for it. In Qatar, we have a specific court for Shias, for example. Non-Qataris, even Muslims, even Arabs, your hometown laws will apply. One thing, the concept of trust is not existence in the country. So you can do that. As long as you're alive, you can do whatever you want, the way you want it. You can create a trust. But we don't have a specific law dealing with that.
Is that true?
No, not necessarily. Now the trick with that is that if you don't have a will, and if you don't have heirs, based on which the state will be able to transfer your belongings to, the state will give your money to charity. There is no distinction between women and men in that regard.
If you pass away, how long is the surviving family allowed to stay in Qatar to deal with these matters?
They would allow you to, as long as they are resolved. Because the main issue is that all of these accounts, remember, the state doesn't want to take that responsibility. They don't want to have your money blocked. They don't want to have your car blocked, because it's a responsibility and a liability to them. So if somebody passes away, and we've seen that in a real life experience, they are very tolerant. They would allow them to come in and out as long as they need to resolve all of these issues.
Do I get return tickets back? Or
True.
Those sorts of things. So from the government's perspective, yeah, I can come and go, but I might need to be here to manage this stuff, but there's no resources. I have no housing, no income, no.
True. Well, let me give you a real life example. One of the oil and gas company had this issue. Well, first of all, the law forces the employer to cover the cost of repatriating the body back home. And as I said previously, in that process, you can file an injunction to the court and say, I'm living here, this is a joint account, and I need to spend from it, and they will allow you. They will communicate with the bank and allow you to do that. Now, in case of this oil and gas company, what they've done, usually employers in these situations, they are very cooperative. They've covered the cost. They paid all of the entitlements to the accounts. They made sure that the family is taken care of. What we advise people to do is, if you don't have business to be in Qatar, and probably most of people would love to go back to their home country, is appoint a lawyer and leave. He will take care of that process. Now, if you need to stay for example, schooling, if you have kids, usually employers cooperate with that. And if they didn't cooperate with that, there are so many places that you can go and file complaints based on which they will force them, one of which is the Human Rights Department, the Labor Department, and the Human Rights Committee. We've seen it. They force people to accept for a period of time. And if the sponsor doesn't want the responsibility, usually the state will say, fine, you sign a declaration and they live in the country, the state will be sort of responsible of you. We actually advise that. You can have a generic one in the US, including Qatar. But again, the part related to Qatar, try and do it locally, or translate your will back home, get it attested locally, so it will help you in the process. Again, they are considered non-locals. If they are minors, by default their laws, their country laws will apply. Whomever is the guardian as per that law will be able to take care of it. If they are past, based on your back home laws, if they are past certain age, will be considered no longer a minor, then that law will apply and he can have a will. So it's all about your back home laws and legislation and how it can be applied in Qatar. The only thing Qatar courts, the Qatari part will do is basically apply the requirements or imposition of your own laws. Well, the good thing about financial institutions and debt, it's personal under the law. So I'm not liable for my father's debt and he's not liable for my debt. They will be able to leave. They will be even able to repatriate the body. It has nothing to do with that. The only thing that usually banks require is employers to transfer the entitlements to that specific bank account they control, because that way they can deduct their own money and leave. The only step they can take if the money is not enough, file a claim in the court, and that's it. And he's passed away, so if the court issued a decision, they will need to look for the assets he owned, sell them, try and pay off the debt. Well, no, you keep a copy with you. The way we do it, we keep a copy with us as a law firm, copy with the relevant parties, as much copies as you want. And if you have an executor appointed, I would say give him a copy. The only thing we do is the Ministry of Justice will attest the will just to give it credibility when it goes to court, and it cannot be challenged. Anything that needs to be submitted to the court or the governmental agencies needs to be in Arabic. It's the official language. They will ask you to translate into Arabic, and they will look at it. Now, in terms of death, the power of attorney terminates with the death, and there is no such thing in our legal system that a power of attorney could survive, even if you say that in the will. In terms of incapacity or medical issues, if you have a valid will, if it was done and specifies a person who should take care of you or manage your wealth, and your laws allow it back home, they will enforce it.
I don't know if I misunderstood you in the beginning, but I thought you said that if someone dies here without a will, they have to actually go home and get things attested or whatever before they can take the body.
No, the example I gave you is a real life example where a person passed away and his daughter wanted to repatriate his body back home, and because there is a car under his name, the Ministry of Interior did not allow them to repatriate the body. And I think they fixed this issue because the system didn't allow it. If when you are passed away, your visa will be terminated, or residency. So once it's terminated, you have to sell any belonging before you leave the country.
We've looked at two scenarios where were repatriated, but they didn't have to sell the car.
Yeah, so the one we had, we resolved it, but I think because it's not in the law, it's a process that they follow. I think they fixed it. We haven't faced it after that. It was once. And because of that incident, we tried to come up with a system that will overcome any rules or policies that could be implemented in the future.
What happens if I'm in a coma? Is my husband able to make decisions on my behalf as to whether or not I'm intubated or are they just...
If he's in the country, yes. Now, if your laws does not allow him to do that and somebody comes and challenge it, he will have to show that he is the one, or what we call the legal guardian in this case. You asked me something about tax. There is no taxes in Qatar, so you shouldn't worry about that. Yes?
Going back to the bank account, if my wife has a bank account, she's under my sponsorship. So
Yes.
the bank account will still have my ID or my visa connected to that account. So if I pass away, is that account frozen as well?
No. No. When they open, as far as I understand, when they open an account in a bank under her name, your sponsorship is, or your residency is required because you are the sponsor, right? But it's personal. It's her account. They won't touch it.
So my husband's Qatari, I'm Canadian. Let's say he doesn't have a will.
Yes.
What happens to me?
Okay. Do you have kids? Do you have kids?
No.
Okay.
Let's say that,
Well, let me explain to you.
okay.
I'm assuming he's a Muslim, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
so am I.
Okay. He's a Qatari. Qatar law will apply. What happens? You're covered. You get a percentage that is already decided. If you have kids, if you have a son, a boy, he will block everybody else. His family will not be able to take a penny out of his wealth because he has a son. If it was a daughter, then his parents will be, there is a percentage that goes to the parents, his parents.
So could he do it in a way that he writes a will so that they're basically like it doesn't go along with Islamic law? Like, let's say he decides that he wants the children to have equal inheritance, regardless of sex.
The only way to do it is he gives away his nationality and have a different nationality. But what he can do is the 1/3 he has, he can actually devise 1/3 of his wealth. He can decide on a will saying that this 1/3 should go to the girls, for example. But see, being in Qatar, being a Qatari and a Muslim, you don't have a choice. It's already decided. And I think most of the Islamic countries or Arab countries, they have the same system.
You have a will for yourself, you have a will for your spouse, and then what happens if, like, is there a certain provision that you put in these wills? In the event that both of you die at the same time,
Yes.
do you need a third will?
Actually, a friend of mine did a will. He assumed that. He's a lawyer, so he assumed the worst. He said, we are in a car, we die, my son lives. What happens? He actually, both of them appointed the same people. Some people do a joint will, and they sign it together. He didn't do a joint will, but him and his wife, they had the same person being the executor, and they specified in case they both passed away.
I'm a legal resident of Virginia.
Yes.
I have a will in the state of Virginia.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, and then you said in order to have it legalized, it has to be translated and legislation stating who my who will inherit me is stated in the legislation there.
Yeah.
I have a son.
Mhm.
Would it be, and I'm a Muslim, would it be easier just to say that I want Sharia law to apply and everything will go to him anyway?
Could be.
Instead of...
If you want, you can. But the problem is, if you decide that Qatar law will apply, it doesn't apply in the U.S. So whatever you have in the U.S.
Yeah, but that's,
So
a separate will for the U.S.
if you can do that, you can do that. It shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
It shouldn't be a problem.